Good evening. The following PowerPoint presentation will be carried out by myself. I am Drew Chadwick and I am the Environment Officer in the South for the Angling Trust. I will also be joined by Ian Doyle, who is the Environment Officer in the North. For any club, syndicate or fishery wanting to apply, depending on where you are in the UK, me and Ian will be your point of contact regarding this round of the AIF. Our contact details will be shared on the final slide. Please note, you must consult with me and Ian before submitting your applications. We will always find the time to visit your site and discuss the most effective ways of utilising the funding. We are hopeful by the end of this PowerPoint presentation, you should have the knowledge of what the AIF is, where the money comes from, what can and cannot be funded, and the correct application process. We are also joined this evening by Andy Petch, who is the Angling Improvement Fund Manager and will be more than happy to answer any queries regarding this round of the AIF. His contact details will be also shared on the final slide. So, what is the Angling Improvement Fund? The AIF is a way of reinvesting income from the EA rod licence sales in projects which can benefit anglers and the angling community across England. The AIF is administered by the Angling Trust on behalf of the Environment Agency, who provide the funding through the sale of non-migratory trout and coarse fishing rod licence sales. Applicants are advised to attempt to match the award with a similar amount of funding from their own sources. Please note, this doesn't necessarily need to be financially. This can be achieved through volunteer hours as well as donations. This round of the Angling Improvement Fund is focused on biosecurity and invasive non-native species management. The funding is predominantly aimed at clubs and organisations who are willing to take action to control any established invasive non-native species on their sites. For example, purchasing equipment or sending club representatives on the relevant training courses. Also, the funding can be spent on improving the biosecurity around your sites. This will reduce the risk of spreading any invasive non-native species or fish diseases and pathogens onto your site or further afield. As I'm sure you're all aware, this round of the AIF went live on Friday the 14th of April, and the deadline for submitting applications is the 26th of May at 5 p.m. We aim to complete the judging process by the 15th of June, therefore all applicants will be contacted shortly after, regardless if you've been successful or not. Just to be clear, any club or organisation can apply for this funding as long as it has a direct impact on anglers and the angling community throughout England. The maximum award will be restricted to £5,000 per project, and you do not have to be an Angling Trust member to apply for this round.
Good evening, my name's Ian Doyle. I'm the Northern Environment Officer for the Angling Trust. I work from Birmingham and into the north. Just a few things that the Angling Improvement Fund doesn't actually cover. And firstly, it's important to note that the predation round is continuing to run until the 28th of April. And that's designed for otter fencing and predation from fish-eating birds. It's a totally different funding stream to the one we're talking about here, which is targeting non-native invasive species and biosecurity. Things it doesn't cover are marginal weed growth, invasive fish species, native species. Of course, this is dedicated to non-native species. It doesn't cover the provision of nets, and it doesn't cover the trapping of Chinese mitten crab or American signal crayfish. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. The trapping of crayfish and mitten crabs, it's not included in the funding stream for several reasons, really. When you consider the spread of crayfish plague and biosecurity and the risk posed to the mistaken identification of white claw crayfish, the risk of bycatch, And in reality, trapping is not considered the best practice, and it's largely ineffective in removal. On top of that, the Environment Agency are quite reluctant to supply licenses due to the reasons mentioned. So what does the Angling Improvement Fund actually cover? So it'll cover pesticide training, that would be PA1, PA6, PA6W, which allows you to spray near water. It'll also cover for stem injection training and the necessary equipment. We'll go into brush cutter training and the equipment. It'll cover surveys. One thing it does cover as well is the Azolla weevil, which is a biocontrol introduced by Cabby fairly recently. It will also cover washdown facilities, biosecurity equipment and net dipping facilities. It will cover mink control. One thing to remember here with mink control, it would be far better, it would be a far more robust application if you didn't just apply for a couple of miles of river or still water and looked into an area application whereby you would make a real impact on the population of mink. That would be a much more robust application. Funding can cover up to £5,000 on individual applications and up to £10,000 on a catchment-based application. I will have missed a few details of things you can apply for in the previous slides. There is a more concise list in the guidance notes, which can be found on the Angling Trust website. The details are up there now in front of you, but we will leave them in the comments box, or if you missed that, you can get them off us at a later date by giving us a shout. If you need any advice or information, feel free to get in touch. Not a problem. We're usually available quite readily. Just a reminder to let you know that we will need to visit site, which will give you some foundation for your application. Thanks for listening.
The following slides are some examples of how the funding could be utilised. All images shown are from applicants who have been successful with the AIF over the last couple of years. As you can see, this is a washdown facility. The fishery where this photograph was taken is extremely popular, and often anglers are travelling from far afield to fish the venue. It was the club's main objective to ensure not only do anglers arrive on site with clean and dry equipment, but to ensure all their equipment is checked, cleaned and dried before leaving site. This minimises the risk of any invasive non-native species and any fish diseases leaving the site and spreading further afield. Please note, planning permission may be needed if you or your club are thinking of installing a washdown facility, especially at a leased venue. The two images below show more biosecurity equipment which could be funded through the AIF. The one on the left is an automatic boot cleaner. This will ensure you are not spreading any invasive non-native species, especially seeds from terrestrial invasive non-native plant species such as Himalayan balsam and giant hogweed. The one on the right is a drying rack. These are hugely popular around commercial match fishing venues as they ensure all kit to be completely dry before entering the water. We completely understand that every project is site specific. Therefore, constructing a washdown facility is not always possible at every venue. I have included the image below to highlight there is always a solution for biosecurity. For context, this is a cordless, battery-powered pressure washer which can be used to clean any angling equipment in the most isolated of venues. We hope that you and your clubs and organisations have found this presentation beneficial. As you can see, there is a list of contact details below. Please make a note of these and contact us if you need any further details. As I mentioned before, it is a requirement for myself or Ian, depending on where you are in the country, to carry out a site visit prior to submitting your application.
Well, thank you very much for that, Drew and Ian. So I hope that gives everyone a bit of background context around the AIF and what it can do. So the next section we've got is Dean. So I'm just going to pull your slides up, Dean, and we will run through what your club has been up to with the Angling Improvement Fund. Okay, Dean, so whenever you're ready.
Yep, just give us a second. Right, having listened and watched the presentation from Ian and Drew just now, I'm going to give you a club's perspective of what happens when you're applying for the Angling Improvement Fund and what it entails once you've got it. Okay, so this is from a fishing club association's perspective. Could we have the next slide, please, Alex? Thank you. So what do you do when you hear that dreaded phrase about one of your fisheries? Did you know that you've got Japanese knotweed growing next to your stretch of the river? That's something that I heard last year, and it was from a member of the public, and it was a little bit of a shock. We knew there was a problem there. What we didn't realise that it was Japanese knotweed that was growing. So hence the face. I can assure you that's what I felt like when I found that out. Could we have the next slide, please, Alex? So unfortunately, this isn't a job for those guys. This is something that you will need to tackle either yourselves or by employing a company to deal with it on your behalf. The latter isn't always the easiest option, as we found out for ourselves. Next slide, please, Alex. So, yeah, we were faced with the issue in the summer of 22 when I received a call from a member of public, and ours was on the River Kennet. Fortunately for us, it is on the Kennet and Avon Canal section where the river runs side by side, so there is the towpath. And it was just a very vigilant and obviously caring person in the general public who contacted me to say that what she thought we had on our stretch of the river. So obviously the first thing you're going to do is start finding out about that subject, Japanese knotweed, and then what you can do about it. So having discussed it with the committee, we decided that we would get a quote from a professional company for the removal of the knotweed. That was also, I also discussed it with the Action for the River Kennet as well, which is a group that look after the Kennet. But then it obviously set alarm bells ringing for us because it was going to cost us in the region of £4,000 for the first year and subsequent amounts for the next, and it was probably going to be at least 3 other years until it was eradicated. And this is when I was glad that our association were members of the Angling Trust, and I was also a personal member. So I carried out a search on the Angling Trust website about Japanese knotweed, and luckily for me, an article popped up saying the Angling Improvement Fund bids were now open for the removal of invasive and non-native species. Next slide, please, Alex. So then obviously the application process is always going to begin. And like many applications which involve applying for funding, it is very time consuming, but you're always going to hope that it does prove to be worthwhile in the end. And the first thing I found out when I contacted Drew, who is obviously the Angling Trust representative for the South, was that they did not provide funding for fishing clubs to pay for a company to deal with the invasive species. They would only provide the funding for a member or members to do the PA1 and PA6AW training, so that they can get the relevant qualifications for spraying herbicide near to the water. And they would also pay for the equipment needed to carry out the work yourselves. For me personally, this is where the difficulty arose, probably like many of you in the meeting tonight who are voluntary members for fishing clubs. Like me, you have a real job. When I contacted my nearest training centre, all of the advertised dates were during school term time, which wasn't going to be suitable for me. So I was never going to be able to negotiate a release for my job to do any training. So subsequently, I contacted the training centre and asked if they could offer the training on their next release dates during one of the school holidays. And thankfully they did, which means I now have the relevant qualifications to treat the Japanese knotweed myself. And more importantly, our fishing association has saved thousands of pounds in the process. And next slide, please, Alex. So in summary, don't fear the dreaded phrase, because there is help out there. I hope I have given everyone a starting block to help you and your fishing clubs to tackle the issue of IWNS on your fisheries. And the most important thing I did find was, don't be afraid to ask questions. Never be afraid to ask questions, because there are always people out there that are going to listen to you and they will want to help you. So that's for the Angling Trust, organisations where you're going to do the training. As I found, people can be very, very accommodating. So that's it, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dean. I think that